Welcome to our Walk in My Shoes series for professional advisors. Wishing you all a lovely day wherever you are in the world. Here in London, the sun is shining and it's very welcome after a long lockdown in the winter. My name is Lucy Jaffe and I'm Director of Membership and Development here at Philanthropy Impact and your moderator for this series. As a not-for-profit membership organisation, Philanthropy Impact exists with the mission to increase and improve philanthropy and social investment and to also encourage impact investing. We work with professional advisors to private clients to increase your knowledge and skills in advising clients in their sustainability and impact journeys, whatever your discipline. If you have any questions about what we do, the training we offer and how we can collaborate, please do get in touch with me directly in the chat today. As this is a strictly 30-minute session and we are taking questions, we ask that you use the chat function to introduce yourself, have your say, but also to pose your questions to our panel. Please make sure to add panelists and all attendees if you'd like to interact on the chat and remain respectful to all throughout. Today, we are exploring restorative justice with our panel of experts, and it is my pleasure to introduce our CEO, John Pepin, as chair for this one. And joining John, we welcome Lucy Jaffe, I hope that's right, I've known you long enough, I should know that, Director at Restorative Justice Organisation, Laurie, Hunte, Criminal Justice Programme Manager at Barrow Cadbury Trust, and Peter Woolf, Restorative Justice Advocate. Thank you all for your time and insight today, and I'll now hand over to John to make a start. Thanks, John.
Well, thank you, Sophia, and welcome everyone. This is a pretty important topic to be discussing, and I think that from a professional advisor and others' perspective, it's important to understand some of the key issues around this, and it's not a well understood thing. So Lucy, could we just start off with each one of you saying who you are and what your organization is? So Lucy. Yeah, sound. Unmute.
Hello everyone, I'm Lucy Jaffe. I am Director of WIME, Transforming Lives Through Restorative Justice. I've been here for 9 years, prior to which I was in the corporate sector in insurance software. So a strange but fascinating portfolio of work. And WIME is an organisation set up by a victim of crime to open up access to restorative justice for all victims of crime. And you'll hear more about that in a minute.
Thank you. Laurie.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. My name's Laurie Hunte. I'm the Criminal Justice Programme Manager at the Barrow Cadbury Trust. The Barrow Cadbury Trust has been in existence for 100 years now, set up by the descendants of the chocolate maker in Birmingham originally. And now we operate from London, and we have a number of different key themes, one of which is criminal justice. We work in the migration space, we work on economic justice, and we also look at social investments as well. So enough about the organisation, we'll get into the subject matter in a minute.
Okay, thank you. Peter.
Hi, yeah, Peter Woolf, author, advisor in restorative justice, currently working on several projects, including products of postcode, doing some advisory work in Israel with Israeli Palestinian organizations.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, so Lucy, I want to start off with you. Maybe you could tell us what restorative justice is and why it's needed.
So restorative justice is a process which brings a victim and an offender together to talk about the harm. It transforms lives by enabling people to resolve conflict and find a way forward. There are three key questions for each person. What happened? Who's been affected and how? And what should happen next? And a trained facilitator brings those people together to have that conversation. It's just what we need at a time when there's so much tension and pressure in our lives, but also traditional justice systems are really falling apart and struggling to deliver access to everybody. So we need something like restorative justice to show us a way forward, to address conflict and enable the very human part of ourselves to come forward. And to resolve things between ourselves.
Why would I, if I was a victim, want to do this, or if I was the other side, criminal, why would I want to participate in this?
It's a really good question. So many people who are victims of crime through no fault of their own go to the criminal justice system and think, I'm going to get justice. But actually, the day in court is really disappointing for most people. And there's very high dissatisfaction levels, and you have unanswered questions. Why me? Why did you come and burgle my house? Why did you attack me? And you really, the only person that knows the answer to those questions is the person who did it. So restorative justice gives you, as a victim of crime, the opportunity to ask the person themselves and to have that human conversation and interaction. People find it very, very helpful in recovery. In fact, one woman I know, she said, I went from being a victim to a victor after speaking to the person who stabbed me. So her life was transformed.
So it's not about getting revenge then?
It's not at all about revenge. And in fact, it's a voluntary process, and it's a win-win. So both parties come away feeling better, and that is successful restorative justice.
It's interesting because when I was working with restorative justice around the whole accreditation thing years ago, I learned a lot of techniques that I was able to start to apply to my business. So really quite neat. Peter, can you describe or discuss with us or let us know about what your journey was through the whole restorative justice process? Why you were there, and what was some of the positive outcomes or not?
Okay. On March the 6th, 2002, almost 19 years ago, I committed the last crime I was able to commit. Prior to that, I was probably best described as a prolific offender, a walking crime wave, whatever you choose to call me, someone who damaged people's lives for selfish motives. I'd never heard of restorative justice, and if I'm honest, I took part in it just to get out of the cell for an hour, and that's the truth. And, you know, I'm not going to lie about it. However, I went through this process, and it changed my life. It totally changed my life. It made me understand the harms. It made me understand the damage I've done, not just to an individual, but to a family, to a group, to a community. It spreads, and it made me understand. It got me thinking about the whole process, and it changed my life totally. So that was 19 years ago. 2 years after, 2 years later, after going through this process, I was interviewed by an economist from the Home Office, and it was estimated that in that 2 years, post RJ conference, through changing my life, through this having an impact on me, it saved the country £1.7 million, just, you know, in taxpayers' money through the stuff that I was doing. So you know, really, it's a win-win. It's a win-win for. I believe that restorative justice is the door, the gateway to the rehabilitation process for the victim, and because the victim is really left out of the whole proceedings. You know, in the immortal words of Will Riley, he says the victim, the friends, the family are the most affected but the least involved in the justice system. And I think through restorative justice, it really changes that.
So you left to have 1 hour just out of the cell, as you say. What convinced you to go back a second time?
You know, listen, the whole thing. You know, I was put on a promise of a packet of chocolate obnums. That got me out of the cell. Getting out of the cell for something to do, more, you know, just to alleviate the boredom as part of it. But I think, really and truly, most people have got this goodness in them. It just needs unlocking, and this seemed to unlock that empathy, awareness, goodness, whatever you choose to call it. This process I call it a 12-inch transition, yeah? And this is not any religious connotation or anything like that. However, all my life I put up barriers and I made justifications and I had excuses and they was all there. And one by one, as I was sitting listening to the victims of the crimes I committed, as I was listening to the harms that I caused, these barriers and these justifications started getting stripped away, and suddenly the process dropped 12 inches and it went to my heart, because I'm sitting in a room in Pentonville prison witnessing 2 grown men crying because of my actions. And you know, this is heartbreaking stuff. This was heartbreaking, but it was more than anything, it made me understand. You know, you get that? It made me understand the exact nature of the wrongs I was doing. Prior to that, a victim had just been an A4 piece of paper, a statement. I left my home at 7 o'clock this morning. I returned home to find the door window had been false. I gave no one, full stop, signed date. All very sterile. Go to court, got a barrister and a prosecution barrister, all very sterile. And, you know, I was a career criminal. I knew what was going to happen anyway. I was going to prison. You know, this was no big deal for me. Going to prison was easy. Going to prison was really easy. Going through the RJ process was one of the hardest things I ever done.
Your peers in prison, what did they think of what you were doing? Were they supportive of you, or did they just see it as another con?
No, it was, some people thought I'd found God, some people thought I'd gone mad, some people thought whatever they thought. I didn't care. I didn't care. I knew that this was the pivotal moment for me. This was the pivotal moment. And you know, I've never reoffended. I've never taken. I was a drug addict, alcoholic, and you know, on March the 6th, I committed my last crime, but I also took the last drug, and I also drank the last bit of alcohol. So on Saturday, I'm 19 years clear of everything. You know, this is a big deal for me. You know, who would have given me 19 minutes at one stage? So I didn't care. This was such a meaningful process. It made me sit up and think.
So, but your peers, your fellow prisoners, did they see this as something that they would like to do as well? Were you able to act as a model for them or encourage them as well?
I think back at the beginning, it was an unheard process. You know, I was part of Home Office research, and but as time's gone on, I work in prisons. I've gone in prisons. I do workshops in prisons, and I like to think that you know, what I've done over the last 19 years has had some sort of influence on people changing their life around. In fact, I know it has, and you know, I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet, but I know that, you know, by doing what I do now, I put myself up as this role model. I put myself up to show that change is possible.
Okay, so you took restorative justice. You went through this major change. Was it enough, or did you need other supports beyond that so that you could continue without a life of crime? And what are you doing now?
Okay, support, ongoing support is one of the most important things. You know, there was no epiphany, weren't a bolt of lightning come out the sky and hallelujah, I changed. It set the wheels in motion, and I went through certain processes and programs, and you know, to this day, I go to self-help fellowships, more to give back these days. And what am I doing there? I live in Sweden. I travel the world, speaking at various universities all around the world, involved in quite a few different projects in an advisory capacity. I've got a beautiful life, you know, and it's so far detached from where it was. You know, my last days of being a criminal, I used to live in a dustbin, and not a metaphoric dustbin. You know, it got me. The drugs, the alcohol, the whole lot got me. Today, I've got a nice home, plenty of everything. You know, I've got a nice life. I've got a nice life, and this is all down. And you know, it's not what I've got. It's what I haven't got. I haven't got any victims. That's the important thing.
That's terrific. Thank you for sharing that, Peter. Lucy, is this typical?
Is Peter's reaction typical?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the kind of success, is that typical? Is it difficult to get other people involved? That can...
So restorative justice has very, very high satisfaction rates amongst victims, like 85%. And an impact, it stops people reoffending, makes people think twice, and that's across the board. What has happened over the last 20 years is a small group of dedicated professionals and funders, like Barrow Cadbury, but also the Brennick Myers, who have the Porticos Foundation, and recently the Kleinwort Bensons through their CHK Foundation, have supported us to build what is really a kind of golden nugget of restorative justice, which could really, if it was released, we could see huge social change, not just in criminal justice, but also in the corporate sector. I can see application for it in the corporate sector amongst in HR departments to resolve conflict, to ensure that we don't hit litigation. Alternative dispute resolution is a really good example where you get arguments between companies. I think there's massive potential and it's sort of there for the taking. Yeah, it's, in my view, after 9 years, you know, it's a 20-year project to make the change. But I personally would really encourage high net worth advisors to sort of understand more about restorative justice, so you can go and talk to your clients and know more, you know, how to refer them.
It's interesting, the number of tools, because I know that the people who provide the service are accredited, but the number of tools that they use is quite fascinating. There is one that I borrowed for my consultancy, where if you're in a room of a group of people and there's issues around trying to achieve some kind of agreement where there's differences, one of the techniques that could be used was to have each person speak, but no one else can say anything until that person's spoken, and then you go completely around the room. By the time you get around one and a half, maybe 2 times, they listened and understood, and you can then get some understanding amongst the group. Really quite effective technique, and the other ones as well. Laurie, let's turn to you. So you're with a funder. Why would any funder, let alone Barrow Cadbury, get involved in this area? Because I know that one of the things you do is fund YME, but why do that?
Thank you for asking the question, John. I think it's probably worth just stepping back a little bit and thinking about the sort of a strategic place that Barrow Cadbury wants, a strategic type of funder that we are, and that we want to sort of shape what happens to young people going through the criminal justice system. And we just feel that restorative practice, restorative justice is a really useful intervention for young people. What we found is that potentially restorative justice practitioners have built up a huge reservoir of knowledge about it. We want to make sure that that knowledge is spread across the justice system. So through a number of different grants, we've made the case for greater provision for restorative practices for women in the justice system, for young people, and particularly young adults. Young adults are, you don't become an adult on your 18th birthday, and it's a process of developing maturity. And we really feel that it's very important that young adults aren't just treated as any old adult. There's a particular distinct approach used to them, and we very much encourage sort of restorative justice practices being targeted on 18 to 25-year-olds. They are developing, their maturation is developing, and there's a really good opportunity for learning at that particular age group. So we've been supporting organisations like YME really think about how that provision how criminal justice services can best use the RJ provision for that particular age group. I'll stop there for now, but thank you for asking the question.
Well, I guess I'd like to explore a bit more, because this is only one aspect of the work of Barrow Cadbury around young offenders and stuff. So can you give me a bit more information about what you're doing that for, etc.?
So of course, so I should sort of take another step back. I think it's probably about 4 different elements of a criminal justice strategy. Focusing on young adults, 18 to 25-year-olds, and developing maturity, having a really clear focus on inequalities, for example, gender inequality and race inequality, and also making sure that the voice of the victim, of the offender, of the person that uses a service can come out and inform criminal justice policy and practice. And because of the Trust's historic links to Birmingham, we're always looking to develop work in that particular region, particularly with a focus on developing pilots, small delivery type services, and then learning from that and making the case for change across the criminal justice system. So in terms of actually restorative justice practice and why we think it's important, restorative practice, I believe, has historically been used where people feel it's safe to use it. What we want to see is that opportunity being offered to a whole range of people. For example, historically, people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities don't get the same provision, and restorative justice practices could be particularly helpful. And we do want to continue to support organisations that make the case that restorative practice is really useful tool for actually coming to terms with some of the damage you've done, engage in victims, understand the victim's perspective, and then to try to build on and try to develop a different relationship with society. So we continue to make those arguments and really support the work of organisations like YME and work that Peter does as well.
It's interesting. Years ago, I was working with an organization that dealt with substance abuse, and it was an international board of very wealthy people, but all of the board members were there because they had faced something in their families about substance abuse. Is that the same thing that's happening here, or is the motivation just because you have impact and you can help people like Peter? Lucy?
Sorry, the question is, why am I here, or
why do funders get involved? Is it just to achieve impact? Is there personal issues involved? Is it a combination?
I think, well, some funders have a very strong interest in criminal justice, like the Bronick Myers through their family foundation. And others, I mean, I have to say, when you hear the story of Will Riley, who set up this charity, and his meeting with Peter Woolf, who's the man who burgled and attacked him in his home, you're moved. And when we went to meet the Bronick Myers at their family meeting, and they both met Will and Peter and heard them speaking, I mean, they were signed up instantly. I think there's a real need for solutions. So under the Social Development Goals of the United Nations, you know, one of those, number 3, is healthy lives and promoting well-being. How can we do that? Big questions. Well, restorative justice really helps that, to achieve those goals, because it helps people to take back control over their own narrative, and to also be each other's assets in their recovery. And then Social Development Goal number 16 as well, promoting peaceful and inclusive society. So the justice goal, I mean, restorative justice is an absolute gift to achieve that goal. It's just a sort of, it's not been watered and nurtured sufficiently at the moment. I think there's a really good seed there.
I'd like to point out that if anyone wants to ask a question to the panel, if they just type it into the chat line. Peter, I was talking the other day to a professional advisor in the wealth management area, and he said that he had been robbed by someone and attempted to go through the restorative justice, but the person who had did the criminal behavior would refuse to do so. Why do you think that someone would refuse from that end to do so when your experience has been so positive?
probably fear. It's probably fear. Probably, I can't comment on the preparation or anything like that. However, I think what we need to be looking at is more than just the face-to-face meeting. You know, there's far more to restorative approaches, practices, justice, whatever you choose to call it. You know, we need to prepare people. We can prepare people for that sort of conference. We can get people thinking restoratively. We can get people, you know, workshops around restorative justice, give the offender the courage. Listen, when I went in to meet Will Riley, he was 6'4", and you know, I was just a couple of weeks off of heroin and alcohol. I didn't know if it was a trick and they was going to beat me up. I didn't know none of this. I just trusted the process. I just had a little bit of faith and went in there. And but anything could have happened. And if I was thinking like that, other people think like that. I'm not unique. I'm not unique in this restorative process. Loads of people I know have been through this process, and loads of people have come out the other end. Not everyone successfully, but an awful lot of them successfully.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. We have a question in the chat from George King. It is, to what extent are these issues different rather than similar as you look across other jurisdictions or countries?
Well, I know a lot about the so in Europe, there's a European directive on victims of crime, but there is also a European Restorative Forum, which brings together, I'm, for example, in a group about looking at restorative justice with victims of terrorism, and there the issues coming up are very, very similar. The difference is the application in the jurisdiction. So that's where the kind of conversation arises, where how do you insert it into your criminal justice system? Oh, somebody else. In America, they use it a lot in and out of prison, but also in community. So they call it transformative justice when it applies to communities. And a lot of people are doing it for themselves there in community. And it'd be interesting to bring that across into the UK. I think there's another one, John, isn't there?
Yes, there is. That's from Patrick Crockford. What is the success rate of this process? Does it depend on an offender's circumstances? Peter seems to have been able to get off his addictions. Otherwise, would he have continued to offend? So it's just getting off the addictions, Peter, that did it, or is this helpful in other ways to you?
Okay, if I'm honest, I was a criminal first, so addiction it wasn't the driving. It wasn't the driver for me. Had I not gone through this process, would I have continued to offend? Probably. Would I continue to take drugs? Probably. Would I still be alive now? Definitely not. So, you know, I've got a lot to be grateful for through this process. Does it depend on the offender's circumstances? No. You know, this is not an exclusive club where you've got to be down and out in Beverly Hills or something like that. This is not what it's about. This is about empathy. This is about, you know, understanding. We've all got the capacity to understand. We've all got the capacity to change. You know, very few people, you know, have a mental condition that incapacitates them, so to speak. To be vigorously honest, and this is what this is about: being vigorously honest. You know, and understanding other people's pain.
Great, thank you, Peter. Sophie has come on, but I'm going to exercise my decision, and we're going to continue for another 2 minutes, Sophia, so I hope you don't mind. Okay, so final words of wisdom for the audience. We'll start with Lucy.
I'd say come and have a look for yourself. Go and watch The Woolf Within, the 10-minute video about Will and Peter meeting, and it will move you and it will help you to explain restorative justice to your clients.
Thank you. Laurie.
Thank you. I think just use your professional expertise. I understand there's lots of knowledgeable people on the seminar today, and to really think about the criminal justice sector, what it's trying to achieve and whether it can achieve the same things in a different way. So just being going out and researching the topics and making important and useful decisions in terms of funding new ideas that can actually do things differently.
Well, it's also a way to get ideas to apply to your workplace as well and to your life. So it's broader than this. Peter, you get the final word of wisdom, 30 seconds. Go for it.
Okay. Restorative approaches, practices, justice, call it what you will, is probably the most effective tool in the criminal justice system to date, yet it's the least used. Please support it.
Great, Peter. Thank you very much. So Lucy, Peter, Laurie, thank you very much for this. Over to you, Sophie.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. It's good to hear it, because I know of restorative justice, but I didn't know the extent to which it can have success in social change. So thank you for sharing all of that. And thank you, Peter, for sharing your personal stories. That's it's really good for you to do that with us today. So next week we are going to be doing a session to mark International Women's Day on the 8th of March. So please join us for that. Hope to see you there. And in the meantime, everyone have a great week. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.